What does it mean to be the man no one will look at? 25 centuries ago, in the city of Rājagaha, the Magadhan capital, there was a man whose work began before the city woke. His name was Sunīta. He swept dead flowers from the courtyards and emptied the refuse baskets along the streets. The lowest of the city's castes, a man whose shadow, by the rule of his time, was not to fall across the shadow of another. This story is preserved in the Theragāthā, the verses of the elder monks. In the 12 verses Sunīta himself composed, with the commentary by Dhammapāla, preserving the life that came before them. It is one of the strangest stories in the canon, because the man at the center of it had walked his entire life with his eyes on the ground. And because on the morning this story takes place, someone stopped in the road and asked him to look up. To understand what the asking did to him, you have to understand what his life had been until then. The work began in the dark. Hours before the city was up, before the kitchen smoke rose from the houses, Sunīta moved through the lanes with his baskets and his pole. He carried a yoke across his shoulders. From each end hung a wide, flat basket. Into the baskets went what the city had set out the night before: the swept-up petals of yesterday's offerings, the husks of vegetables, the dust the householders had pushed to their thresholds. He worked alone. He had always worked alone. In the second hour before dawn, the lanes were quiet. A stray dog moved in the alley. A shutter might crack open, and a woman might glance out and pull the shutter closed, and no one looked. He came to the edge of the river, emptied the baskets where the refuse was kept, washed his hands in the cold water, and walked back into the lanes. The work was always there. The lanes were always quiet, and no one looked. By daylight he was finished, and by daylight he was not to be seen. This was the rule, and the rule was older than him. The work he did was necessary. The man who did it was not. There were customs about which streets he could enter, at which hours, where he could sit, where his shadow could fall, where his shadow could not. If the city was waking, he kept to the wall. If a higher caste man came up the lane, he stepped to the side of the road. If a Brahmin passed, he put down the pole and pressed his back against the stone. He stepped to the side of the road. He stepped to the side of the road. He stepped to the side of the road, and no one looked. He had been doing this since he could remember. His mother had done it. Her mother had done it. The rule was the air the family had breathed for as long as the family had a name. In the city, he had a place. The place was the wall. These are his words preserved. Low was my birth, poor was my livelihood. My work was the work no one wanted. The flowers offered yesterday, withered overnight, were what I carried. Low was my birth, poor was my livelihood. The men who passed in the lane did not see me, and this was correct. The women at the windows did not see me, and this was correct. The children who would have looked were taught not to look, and this was correct. Low was my birth, poor was my livelihood. With a humble heart, I bowed my head to many people. With a humble heart, I bowed my head to people who did not bow back, and this was correct. With a humble heart, I bowed my head, because the bowing was the part of me that was permitted, and the only part. This was my life from the year I could carry the baskets. This was my life from the year I could push the broom. This was my life from the year I learned the rule about the wall. This was my life from the morning I could remember to the morning that this story's about. Low was my birth, poor was my livelihood, and no one looked. The morning the story turns came on like any other morning. He had risen in the dark. He had taken up his pole and his baskets. He had gone out into the lanes. Now the eastern sky was beginning to lighten. The lanes were paling from black to gray. The first cooking fires had been laid. The smoke had not yet risen. He was in a narrow lane near the eastern gate, where the wall of one courtyard met the wall of another. He had his baskets full, the pole across his shoulders. He could hear the sound of feet behind him, many feet, quiet even in step. He pressed to the wall. The Buddha had been staying outside the city, in the bamboo grove at Vailuvana that King Bimbisara had given to him and the monks who walked with him. That morning, with the line of monks behind him, he had walked the alms round into Rājagaha as the city was waking. They came up the narrow lane from the east, the Buddha first in his saffron robe with his bowl, the monks behind him in single file. Sunīta heard them. He pressed his back against the stone of the courtyard wall. He set the pole down at his feet so the baskets would not swing. He put his hands together at his chest. He kept his eyes on the ground. He stepped to the side of the road, and no one looked. The line of monks would pass. He had only to wait. A first pair of saffron-robed feet came into the small frame of his sight on the dust at the edge of the lane. The feet stopped. For a moment, Sunīta did not understand what the stopping meant. The feet should have continued. The line of feet behind them should have continued. The lane was narrow. The work of the alms round was not in this lane. There was no reason to stop. The feet did not move. And then a voice said his name, Sunīta. He had not heard his name in a voice that was not his own, that he could remember in many years. The men who gave him work did not use his name. The neighbors he passed did not use his name. The women at the windows, the children at the doors, the Brahmins in the lanes, they did not use his name. This voice used his name. He raised his eyes, only as far as the saffron of the robe, no further. And the voice said, "Will you leave this work and follow me?" He could not answer at first. The question was in a shape he did not have words for. Someone had asked him a question. He set the pole down. He took the baskets off the yoke. He did not lift his eyes higher than the saffron robe. He said, the word coming out smaller than he had meant it to, "I will." The Buddha said, "Come, monk." That was the ordination. There was no other ceremony. The canon records that the words "come." Monk were the form of it, and the form was complete. Sunīta stepped away from the wall. He stepped, for the first time he could remember, into the middle of the lane. The line of monks parted for him. The Buddha turned. Sunīta walked behind him, out of the lane, and toward the eastern gate. He went with them out through the eastern gate, across the open ground, into the bamboo grove. Veluvana was quiet at that hour. The bamboo had its small daylight sounds. The cells of the grove were small and plain. He was given his bowl. He was given his place. He was taught the order of the days. The work of the practice was the same as the work of his life had been, only inverted. The walking, the carrying, the bending of the body, the hours before dawn. He did not relax. He had been trained by everything that had come before in a particular kind of patience. The verses he later composed say only that he lived alone in the woods and did the work the teacher had set him. In the watches of the night, he sat. What happened in the last watch the canon does not describe. It only records that something opened. What the canon does describe is what came after. In his verses, Sunīta says that toward the end of the night, toward the hour when, in the city, men like him were at their baskets. Indra and Brahma came down to him. The kings of the Deva worlds, the shining ones, the figures the Brahmins of the city had spent their lives making offerings to. They came to the grove. They came to the cell where the man who had swept the dust of Rājagaha was sitting, and they bowed. Low was my birth, poor was my livelihood, and the kings of the gods came to the grove, and they bowed. The men in the lanes had not looked. The women at the windows had not looked. The children had been taught not to look. The Brahmins passing had not looked. And the kings of the gods came to the grove, and they bowed. To the man whose shadow had been required to fall short of theirs, the kings of the gods came down and bowed at his feet. And the Buddha, who had walked into the lane the morning before, smiled. He said plainly, as one man saying a true thing to another, "This is the holy life, not birth, not what the city decided. Low was my birth, poor was my livelihood." And they looked, and they bowed. The verses Sunīta composed are preserved in the Theragāthā as 12 short stanzas under his name. The translation that follows is from the public domain English of Mrs. Carolyn Reese Davids, Psalms of the Brethren, set down in 1913, lightly adapted for the ear. He begins at the beginning. Low my birth was, scant my livelihood. My work was lowly, a sweeper of the withered flowers. He names the meeting. Then I saw the awakened one, entering the supreme city of the Magadans. I put down my carrying pole. I drew near and bowed at his feet. He names what was given. Out of compassion, the supreme of men stood still. Just for me. He closes, not with reflection, not with takeaway, but with the steady, plain statement of a man who has finished. By his word I was made a monk. By his word I was given the homage of the gods.